Okay, let's get started. So thank you all for coming to Last Minute Application Tips. If you don't know me, I am David. I'm a partner here at 7Sage. I've done a helpful annotation of my bio here, so you can check it out yourself. You can also just go to this link. We have an admissions about us and check out everyone on our amazing team. Here's Selene right here. She's also here. Okay. So today I'm going to give you a presentation with some tips and some information. I'm going to try to demystify this mystifying process a little bit and prevent you from doing any self-harm in your applications. And then we'll do some lightning consultations, starting with people who posted in the discussion. And after that, we'll open it up to a bigger Q&A. And finally, at the very end of the webinar, so you have to stay for the whole thing, I'm going to give you the secret instructions for the edit giveaway. Okay, so first, let's start with some basic advice, courtesy of Mr. Freeze from the 97 classic Batman and Robin. Guys, chill out. I know that you're really nervous. It's very nerve-wracking. A lot is at stake here, but you're going to have to try to relax so that you don't make any mistakes at the end. What I've noticed is that people are perfectly willing to take months, sometimes years, to study for the LSAT. They will take weeks to craft their personal statement. They will labor over their diversity statement and their resume. And then, I don't know what it is, at the very end, they try to rush through the applications and they send something off that sometimes is not quite ready to be sent off. I think the problem is that you expect to do all this work for the LSAT and you expect to do all this work for your essays, but you don't expect that you're going to have to do a lot of boring rote work to read through the requirements of each specific essay, or to fill in your biographical information or your employment history. And your impatience your patience wears out and you're starting to get nervous. So it is true that timing matters, and it is definitely true that the earlier you apply, the better. But it's also true that you can largely undo months of work by sending off something that has a bunch of typos. So, don't set an arbitrary deadline for yourself. That's something I see a lot of people do as well. They're like, well, I am going to submit come hell or high water by Thursday at midnight. And that is great if you're finished and you have done all of your checks a bunch of times. It's not great if you're not really ready. Because I promise you that if you wait the weekend and then wait until Tuesday when you've had some more time to, digest everything and redundantly proofread, you will not be in any worse position. Those 4 days won't make a difference. But again, 4 typos will make a really big difference. By the same token, I know you're nervous, but there are legitimate reasons to contact the admissions office. And then there are nagging reasons to contact them. So we'll go over some of those. But bottom line is make sure that you have a good reason for doing it. Okay, how do you make sure that you don't rush? Well, we've put together a checklist. First, I hope you've already done this. When you're working on your essays, get another reader or two. Just make sure that you are not coming off like a jerk, for example. Then you want to format everything when you get to the end. So that means double space it. You'll add your name and the document type like personal statement and your LSAC number in the header. Your LSAC number should be in every document with the possible exception of the resume. I used to say don't worry about putting it in the resume, and now I feel like, well, why not? Then at some point you just have to polish it. And to do that, you really have to stop tinkering. Another thing actually that I see all the time is the last minute complete, not just revision, but re-envisioning of the personal statement. And sometimes that makes sense. The times that makes sense is when the personal statement isn't good and you come up with a much better one. The times when it doesn't make sense, and this is actually what I see much more often, is you have a good personal statement, but you're bothered because it doesn't seem perfect. It doesn't seem like the essay that's going to make the admissions officers leap out of their chair and say, by George, we have to let this person in, call her up right now and cancel the rest of my day. And that's not going to happen. You know, you are just, let me tell you right now, you're not going to write the essay that makes them do that. What you can do is write a good essay, you know, a very good essay. And that's your goal, not to write the perfect essay, but to write the good essay. And so even though it is super important to take your time and construct it thoughtfully and make sure that you have thought through every single line, once you've already done that, you probably don't have to scrap the entire thing and start over. And, you know, there's just a point of diminishing returns with every essay. I am a writer. I know where you're coming from. I have done the same thing. But what you just have to realize is that every essay just reaches the top of its little hill. And when it gets there, you can keep changing it, but you may not make it better. You might just make it different. So the reason I think it's important to do that, not only, I think it's important to do that not only so that you can, you know, submit in a timely manner, but also so that you can proofread the thing, because you're going to have to hold it still to proofread it. You can't revise it and then proofread it and then decide to revise it again, because you've just completely undone all the proofreading. So we take proofreading really seriously here. We want you to proofread and proofread and proofread again and make sure there are absolutely no errors in your application. It's a joke, I know. But seriously, you need to proofread, you know, more than once. A couple ways to do that. Sometimes I, when I'm proofreading my own stuff, I will read it out loud. I think it's helpful because it slows me down, and it also just literally helps me hear it in a new way. If you have a printer, I think it's really nice if you can print it out and read it on paper. If you don't, maybe you can just change the font size. Just do something so that it looks different to you. I think that when you see something over and over again, you just sort of ice skate over it at some point without really reading it, even when you think you're reading it. And so that's why we see this all the time too. People will have read their essays 10 times and they won't notice that there is a typo in the first sentence. So you just have to do everything you can to try to, you know, shake the snow globe and let everything resettle and make it look a little bit different to you. Okay, so after you have proofread the heck out of every one of your documents, obviously not just the personal statement, but also your diversity statement, your resume, everything else you're showing them, then you want to fill out the application. And this takes a surprisingly long time. Maybe if I tell you that now, maybe if you know that now, you won't rush through it. Just be prepared. Sometimes it's very tedious. You have to fill out a lot of biographical information. You have to fill out your employment history. You have to do that even though you're also submitting a resume. So people, you know, they just get annoyed because they're like, didn't I already do this? Yeah, you did already do it. And you know what? You have to do it again, because you just have to tell them what they ask for. Some of these applications have short answer questions. So Cornell, for example, has what amounts to a little essay in their application. It's a why Cornell. There's also a who influenced you to apply, etc. Take your time and treat those the same way that you treat your personal statement. Make sure that there are no errors in that either. Next, you want to review the application preview, and I will show you how to do that in a second. But you're going to look at a PDF of it so that you can see what an admissions officer will actually see. And this is probably the most important part of the checklist. I literally think that you should go through every one of these items and check every one of these boxes for every single one of your applications. You want to make sure that you haven't made any typos and that your application itself, again, not just the attachments, but the application responses are squeaky clean. you want to make sure that you followed the instructions, because some applications have different requirements for their personal statements or different length limits. So read the entire prompt. Don't upload stuff that has track changes. Either accept them all or just upload PDFs. Make extra sure that you send the right essay to the right school. This is probably the single easiest way to shoot yourself in the foot. You really, really, really don't want to send your Northwestern personal statement to Georgetown if you end it by saying how much you want to go to Northwestern. Follow the instructions for the resume. Some of these are a little bit finicky. So for example, there are schools that ask you to list the hours for each job. I would just do that anyway so that you don't have to change it for some, but it's, if they don't tell you that you have to do it, you don't have to do it. Some will ask you to specify whether each job is part-time or full-time. Format your essays consistently. So there's more than one acceptable way to format the essay. Don't try them all. Just pick one. If you use 11-point font in your personal statement, you should use 11-point font in your diversity statement, etc. Your headers also should be consistent, and they should have your name and your LSAC number. Answer the character and fitness questions correctly. This is another one that I see every single year. Somebody will check yes accidentally when the answer is no. I don't see the other way so much. I almost never see someone accidentally check no when the answer is yes. And that would actually probably be worse. But it's not great to check yes and then not send an addendum because you don't have one because you didn't actually do anything. And then, of course, if you wrote extra essays or extra addenda, make sure they're all there. Finally, you'll submit. Okay, how do you download that PDF preview? Well, you're going to go on the application homepage on LSAC and just click this button. It says Review Application PDF. This is going to show you what an admissions officer will actually see when they are reading your application. You might notice when you do it that it doesn't actually have the prompts and everything's in one big long scrolling document. When you get here, you can just click this little arrow to download it and look through it at your leisure. Okay, what happens after you click submit? Where does your application go? Well, the LSAC transmits your application in 2 packets. Once you hit submit, and this is the only part that you have to do, by the way, all of the rest of this just happens. Once you hit submit, they will transmit the e-app. That's the stuff that you upload and fill out for each school, like your personal statement, your diversity statement, and your resume. And then they will also transmit your CAS report. This is the stuff that's warehoused on LSAC that you're not uploading for each school. So your LSAT scores, your transcripts, your letters of recommendation, your academic summary, and a few other pieces of information. It is possible that your CAS report is not complete when you submit. For example, if you don't have a valid LSAT score yet, or if your transcripts have not been processed yet, LSAC might transmit your e-app without your CAS report. But once you submit, you can see if your application is complete. And it will be complete. You're fine if you've already uploaded your transcripts and they've already been processed and all that stuff. Okay, so these materials go into a proprietary system called the ACES database, and this is where schools can access them. Usually someone in their administrative staff will take a look at it, process it on their end, on the school's end, and update the status checker. I don't think every school has one, but most schools do, and they'll send you an email with instructions on how to access it. And then this part is all the black box. This is, how the decision gets made. So the school's going to dispatch your application to a reader. Schools do this strategically sometimes. They may have certain readers reading certain kinds of files, but you know what? You don't know, and it doesn't matter. It's not something that you can change. Sometimes, they will read a file that comes in immediately. Sometimes they won't. They may prioritize files with certain numbers or applicants with certain profiles. Again, you just can't know, so I don't think you should worry about it. They will, of course, either make a decision or decide not to make a decision yet. And that this side might mean that they send you an email and say, we've decided not to make a decision yet. We've decided to put you on hold. That might mean that they put you on the wait list, or some schools have different kinds of wait lists, the priority reserve wait list. And if they do this, if we're in this world, then at some point they will look at your file again and they will see if there are any updates. That might be things that you send them. You might send them a letter of continuing interest, for example. Or you may send in new transcripts. So we're in this world. If you send in new transcripts, it will be in your file. LSAC will transmit it back into the database. And you know, they will use that information again eventually to come to a decision and notify you. So who hears first? Well, this is a hard question to answer. So you should take everything I'm saying now with a grain of salt. But in general, it's a good bet that people who are at the center of this Venn diagram are going to hear earlier. That's people with high numbers for the school, people with a highly relevant background. What I mean by that is they clearly want to be a lawyer and they've done lawyery things. You know, I don't know, Model UN or something in college, or they've been working as a paralegal. So you can see that they have a high motivation and perhaps high information. Perhaps they know what they want to do with their career and they have a really good reason for doing it that ties into their background. And finally, you really believe that they will matriculate there. So there are no yield protection questions. If you fall into this area right here, you'll probably hear soon. But actually, you know that. So I think I'm really talking to everyone who's in these categories here. And what I'm saying is, don't freak out. These are not the only people who get in. These are probably just the people who are going to get in first in most cases. If you're here, you know, you don't have a highly relevant background, you were an English major and a writer, I'm thinking of someone in particular, his name's me, then, you know, maybe you'll hear quickly, maybe you won't. If you're here, you don't have the highest numbers, but you have a really great background, they might take longer to decide, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get in. It just means they may wait to see how the applicant pool shapes up so they have more information before they make a decision. So I think a piece of advice after you apply is that for the most part, don't try to game it out and don't read into things that don't necessarily mean anything. Here's a helpful flow chart to help you figure out if something means something. So let's say their status checker, the school status checker says that you're under review. Do you read into that? Does it mean that they're about to deny you or accept you? No, it doesn't mean anything. You don't know what the result of that review is going to be. What if the status checker says it's submitted for review, but it's been submitted for review for 2 weeks? Does that mean they don't know what to do with you? No, that means nothing. What if your application went complete immediately in 2 days? Are they really excited about you? No, that means nothing. What if you haven't gotten a decision yet, even though it's January 16th at 9:19 p.m. and other people have heard? Other people have heard with lower numbers. Does that mean you're going to be rejected? No. No, it doesn't mean anything. Same if you haven't gotten an interview request. You can drive yourself totally crazy by, you know, thinking and trying to speculate what's going on and also comparing yourself to people who are posting on 7Sage or Reddit or whatever. But at the end of the day, you don't know. No information really means no information. It doesn't mean you're not going to get in. It doesn't mean you will. The only thing that means something is that you get an interview request. As to what it means, that's harder to say. It may be that they're very impressed with you and they just want to do a normal test. It may be that they're very impressed with you, but they want to gauge your level of interest. Or it may be that there's something they find compelling in your file, but they're not sure about something else. So, you know, getting an interview request does not mean that you are going to get into the law school, although certainly it's not a bad sign. Okay, should you contact the admissions office if? I went crazy with flowcharts. So here's another one. Let's say you find a typo in your application. Well, is it likely to be noticed? So for example, did you find a typo where you accidentally used an N dash instead of an M dash? And then you looked at my sort of OCD post on resumes and how I talked about the difference between N dashes and M dashes. Do you need to send a new one? No, that's probably not going to be noticed. There are certain other typos that are just so small, it is not worth sending a new document. However, if you think it is likely to be noticed, yes, send a new essay. Write to the admissions office and tell them that you noticed a mistake and you'd like to send this essay instead. They will keep both on file, but they will read the new one. It's not ideal, but it is better than them noticing the typo. If you do this, by the way, let me remind you of something I said earlier, which is that you need to proofread 1 billion times because you really don't want to send them an updated essay that has another typo or even introduce a typo when you correct the first one. That's another thing that happens sometimes. People are in such a hurry to correct their mistake that they forget to proofread again a second time. Okay, let's say that you got a new job. Most of the time you want to notify them, but if you haven't started yet, I would probably just wait until you started. I don't think it's really very substantive otherwise. Let's say you got an accolade. Okay, is it a real one or is it kind of BS? If it's a real accolade, you got an award from school or from work, absolutely let them know. And when you're at it, maybe reiterate your interest. If you got new grades or a new LSAT score, should you let them know? I think you should, even though they will see it, even though it will be in their database. I think improving your LSAT score, getting that new report is a great opportunity to email them, say, I would like to inform the admissions committee that on the most recent LSAT, I scored a 173. And maybe a line or two about how you continue to be very enthusiastic about the prospect of going to their school. You maybe don't say anything if you bombed it. Finally, if you were waitlisted or if you haven't heard from them at all by mid-February, yes, I think unless they explicitly tell you, hey, don't bug us, don't get in touch, I think you probably should get in touch with a letter of continuing interest or some such. And this one is a little bit more complicated, and we're not going to unpack it completely here, but we do have a bunch of lessons on this in the 7-Sage course. Okay, just a few more here. If your basic contact information changes, you obviously want to contact them. Some people ask me, should I reply to an offer of acceptance? Sure, it's nice. There's not really a lot riding on that one way or the other, but go for it. You aren't sure if they received your application. Look, they have. I promise you they have. You can also look on LSAC and just confirm that it was transmitted. Okay, let's look at a couple resources that 7-Sage offers. Actually, I'll go in this window. All of this stuff is free, and it's available to all of you. First, the application requirements. We have compiled everything from all the applications for T21 schools, and since LSAC's website is clunky and slow, this might just be more convenient. I have put together some tips on proofreading. I'm not sure if anyone has ever read this lesson in the history of our company, but you could be the first, and I recommend it. It's a great lesson. Let me know if you catch any typos. Okay, we compiled a bunch of advice and accounts of interviews here. All of this, again, is in the 7-Sage course. So we give you, basic all-purpose interview advice, and then we just relate the interviews of some of our students. We got permission of all of these, and we redacted some information, but I think it's still very helpful to see what these interviewers were actually asking people. We have an entire class on letters of continuing interest. This is the first one, but there are a bunch more. So take a look if you are in the position of being waitlisted or you haven't heard from a school for a long time. Related to that, we have a class on writing YX essays. I think that you can write a substantive loci, letter of continuing interest, that enumerates some of your reasons for why you want to go to the school. So this this whole class is also relevant when you're trying to get a school's attention and try to rise to the top of the pile of people who haven't heard yet. We have a law school predictor right here, sevensage.com/predictor. It also lives, I think, in the resources menu. Where does it live? Anyway, sevensage.com/predictor, and I will publicize this entire presentation so that you guys can see for yourself. We're actually updating it this week, but it's very useful. You should take it with a grain of salt. Don't take it literally, but it will give you a sense of where you can expect to get in and where you might expect to be competitive, and where you just probably won't be very competitive. Finally, we have this entire admissions course, and so much of this is free. So you may not know this, but our LSAT website and our admissions website are separate. They're linked, but you can go to the site switcher right here and switch to admissions. And when you do that, this menu is different. Now, if you go to course and you go to syllabus, you will see our admissions course. Most of it's free. Some of it is behind a $10 paywall. Okay. I think it is time to move on to lightning consultations. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to look at what people posted on the forum. I'm going to respond to most of them, but hopefully the people who posted are here, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if I'm reading your question so that we can talk to you live, because we like hearing your voice. It's more interesting than just hearing our voice. So we have the discussion post now. And whoever posted this, Dr. Copeland, can you raise your hand? Do me a favor if you're here. Okay, great. Hi, Danielle. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. And Selene, are you here too?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Okay, great.
Hi, nice to meet you.
So Danielle, do you want to explain your question, or do you want me to just read what you wrote?
Basically, it's, I've narrowed it down to, through all the advice I've gotten through Seventh Age and other people, 2 schools I want to go to specifically because of the programs. And so my 2 questions are, 1, do I even tell them that there are only 1 or 2 schools that I want to go to? And because I am older and I've been out of school for a long time, I won't have academic letters of recommendation. So how do I kind of overcome that? I've been doing different things that probably aren't common. So will that be enough to overcome not having any academic letters of recommendation? I'm not looking to go to Harvard or Yale or anything like that. I'm looking to go to UNC or Miami because of their public interest programs. So they're not one of the top tier 14 schools or tier 1 schools. So is that going to be okay to not have those recommendations?
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Okay.
So to me, I don't know, this is kind of just a gut thing. I think you can convey your interest in the school, and you can probably convey that you are applying to a very, very select list of schools. But I think it would be a little weird to say you're one of 2. You know, it's almost like saying, like, sweetheart, you are either my first or my second favorite person in the world. And it's just weird. Selene, what do you think? Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, I think it's great that you are very clear on what you want to study. And I think it's great that you've picked 2 schools that you're very, very interested in, possibly for their programming and their experiential learning opportunities and opportunities after you graduate. I would caution you in limiting your school selections to just 2, just because your numbers are good, but you never know what's going to happen. And I worry about candidates who put all of their eggs in just 1 or 2 baskets. And you also mentioned that you don't want to hurt your chances of being offered scholarship.
Yeah.
So I would encourage you to maybe pick a couple more, 3 or 4. that you do some research and find a couple other programs that you think might be a good fit for you as well. You don't have to go to them at the end if you are admitted, but I think having that choice is good. And I don't know if all electronic applications ask candidates, what other schools are you applying to? But I think if they do ask you, the admissions office, the admissions committee would like to see, is this candidate being very selective in the types of programs they're applying to, or are their selections just all over the place? Are they all concentrated in a certain tier, right? They're just picking like brand name schools. Or are they very focused in one geographic location? I think that an admissions committee might get a sense of the candidate's seriousness if, they see, oh, this person really wants to study in this particular area because all of their schools that they've applied to are in this geographic area. So it might indicate a certain level of seriousness. And if you indicate in your application that you're pursuing a certain area of law and you put down a list of schools that are all known to be very strong in that particular area of law, then I think that shows a level of maturity and I think professionalism in the way that you have put together your application, the way that you're approaching this whole application process. So I think that I would encourage you to add some other schools, the two that you have. And I think it's fine if you, if it gets to, I know it can be expensive, but it also doesn't hurt to just reach out to other admissions offices of these places that you may apply to and ask them whether fee waivers are available to someone like you and what would be the process of requesting one. And usually they say yes. So I would encourage you to do that. And then I just had a point to add about your letters of recommendation. You said that you are a more mature candidate and you've been doing lots of interesting things since the last time you were in a classroom. I think that's terrific. You should use that as a strength in your application. Don't try to shy away from it. I would embrace it. And that I wouldn't try to resurrect an old academic contact if you haven't maintained a connection with any of your professors. I think it's perfectly fine and probably expected that you would present 2 letters of recommendation from professionals, like a supervisor or colleague or a mentor from a job that you've held or a volunteer position that you held. And I would select the recommenders based on how well they know you and what your goals are, and how well they could speak of your potential for success in a law school and as a future lawyer. And they should, try to write about the things about you that would be a positive contribution to a law school community, like responsibility, maturity, the ability to collaborate, can take direction, can really finish a project, is self-directed, that sort of thing.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Yeah, Danielle, we're out of time because we're going to try to stick to 5 minutes for each person.
That's perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just wanted to say last thing, like make sure you convey to these schools that you really want to go to why you want to go to them. It might be in your personal statement. It might be in a separate essay.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck.
All right. I'm going to lower all hands again, and we're just going to go to the next poster. Okay. Oh, yes. I perhaps made a strategic error. I told someone they could post their whole personal statement. Okay. Mrs. Shark. Mrs. Shark, are you here? If you are, can you raise your hand? If you aren't, oh, great. Okay. Hey, Allie.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Do you want to ask us your question in person since we have your voice so we don't have to just have a moment of silence?
That would be great. So basically, I am debating on writing my personal statement on diving. It's just something I'm really passionate about. And I personally think that my life was I guess, direction was changed by that. But that's kind of all I've got. I don't really know truly what I've learned beyond, I guess, overcoming a fear and opening up opportunities. So I kind of wanted to get your guys' input on that.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a couple things to say about this. One is it might help just to, I don't know what kind of schools you're applying to. It might help to just page through these and sort of see which ones seem more open-ended and which ones don't. Even if they're totally open-ended, you're going to have to find some way, of course, to make it relevant. It could be, and I want to become a lawyer because my scuba mask didn't work and I had to sue the company, and it was a great experience. It could be that, or it could be like diving has taught me this, this, and this, which is going to help me in my career. But it would help to look through these, I think, to know what you're dealing with. In general, I think that higher tier schools tend to be a little bit more welcoming of general sort of personal statements that aren't as related to law, and schools lower on the food chain tend to be a little bit more interested in, the kind of thing that you would write in a cover letter, not a cover letter, not reviewing your experience, but like an explanation of your motivation. But that's not always true. I would also just encourage you to look at our blog, because we posted a couple weeks ago some personal statements here, some of which are, about their legal ambitions and some of which aren't. So that might give you some inspiration. But I think my big picture advice is to think about well, first of all, to consider, what else is out there. Just think for a second if there's anything else you could write about, because you never want to close those doors before you peek through them. And then to think about what diving has taught you and how it might make you a better student or lawyer. Selene, do you have any advice?
Yeah, I agree with everything that you've said. I think that if you keep coming back to diving because it's something that you love and that is really important to you, then I think when you choose to write about it, it will come across in your writing, and it will make your writing seem more genuine and passionate. And I think when someone is writing about something that they care about, usually a reader is more engaged. I would say I wouldn't scrap the idea of using scuba diving, maybe using scuba diving as a metaphor for something else that you learned about yourself. You said it was life-changing. So maybe you could talk about how scuba diving helped you deal with a particular situation, and maybe or a particular encounter, and that somehow is related to possibly why you want to go to law school. I think that it wouldn't hurt you to sort of bring it back to, why are you applying to a professional school? What do you hope to achieve? It doesn't have to be a huge part of the essay. It could just come in right at the end, and the majority of the essay could be about comparing scuba diving to dealing with adversity in life. I think it could be really beautiful, but it should be about you and your thought process and your personality and your journey, not just about the diving itself. And then I think it would make sense that if you're talking about yourself and your character, that eventually you get to, why I want to take myself to law school.
Allie, I would recommend that you read this essay in particular. So this is a student who got into Harvard and Stanford, and she talks about her depression. And, if you read it in like 30 seconds, you'll see that it is not a typical professional letter. But she does the author does an amazing job of explaining the significance and showing how her encounter with depression helped her grow as a person. Living in and out of depression has shaped me in surprising ways. Feeling the inexplicable ebb and flow of the conviction that I will never be happy has ingrained in me a visceral understanding of how easily facts align themselves to narratives. This is a kind of wonkish paragraph and lesson about her intellectual takeaway. And then here's an emotional one. I have learned empathy and humility. I have been someone else, a person who finds my optimism about life to be painfully naive. So, it helps when you write about this to be incredibly eloquent, as this author was, but you can see that it's totally possible to write a great essay about something that does not seem to have anything to do with law. So good luck.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let's go back to the discussion. Oh, Miss Shark, I get it. Okay. History teacher. History teacher, are you here? Can you raise your hand? Awesome. Oh, let's see. Okay.
Hello.
Hey, Gabriella.
Hi.
How's it going?
I'm doing good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Do you want to just ask your question?
I had like a bunch of questions.
Okay. Why don't you ask the first one and we'll see how long it takes us.
Well, the first one was just like an idea that I had for a personal statement.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a teacher, and I was thinking about writing about my first year as a teacher.
Mhm.
And I wanted to focus on like what I learned. So like when I became a teacher, I had like a very like idealistic, like I want to change the world type of like mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that year was like a real like I don't know, it was like really eye-opening, and I struggled a lot, and I almost wanted to quit
Mm-hmm.
like by October. So I kind of wanted to talk about that and just like the realities of teaching in like a low-income urban school because of like the structural things that affect like students' performance. And yeah, so that was kind of my
I
question.
think you could totally write it. I'm going to tell you an essay that I actually see a lot. It's fairly common. It sounds a lot like yours because I think this is a story that happens to a lot of people with big hearts. Idealism, teaching. I came to teaching because I was really idealistic. Met, let's call him Jake, the problem child, realized my ability to help him was limited because of structural issues. And now I want to tackle the structural issues instead of, trying to help people on a case-by-case basis. But just because this is an essay that admissions officers may have seen before doesn't mean you can't write your version of the story. What it does mean is that it has to be incredibly specific. You cannot, this is true for every essay, but you really can't talk in generalities. We want to be there and understand your experience and get vivid details about what it was like. And we don't want mushy, reaching for significance sentences like, there are structural issues. We want to know what the structural issues are and perhaps how you might address them with your JD. So you can do it, but make it specific. Selene, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yes, I agree. I think that structure is pretty common because it's very digestible and easy to read. And I think that what helps make a personal statement really stand out is the level of personal information and specificity that the candidate infuses in the personal statement. And so I would try as hard as you can to put as much of your personality and try to stay away from very common phrases like I went into teaching because I wanted to change the world. very general statement like that,
Mhm.
because that's just going to make that's going to make the reader say, oh, I know this essay, I've read this before. So I would talk about you as a person, you're Jake, who was that? And when you encountered structural issues, like, be really specific. How did you run up against that wall? What were the circumstances, and how did you personally come to that realization, and what did you feel like you needed to do, and how did that bring you to this conclusion that you wanted to approach the system from the standpoint of an attorney? So I think that would be a way of crafting something that could be very distinctive and unique.
All right, Danielle, sorry we didn't get to all of your questions.
Oh, it's okay. My name is Gabby.
Oh, sorry. I was looking at the wrong person. Okay. Thanks, Gabby. Thanks for asking a question. I have just a general thing that I want to say, and I was sort of getting to this earlier. There's a spectrum in personal statements, from personal to statement, to the statement part, statement specifically of purpose. In general, American law schools are much more into the personal part than, say, Canadian law schools are. But you need some of both. And this is what I meant earlier also, like, top tier schools also tend to be a little bit more elastic when it comes to like how personal you can be, whether it's a memoir. And I mean, everyone lets you be personal, but they let you leave this out more in general. But every essay needs to be both of these. You need to find a way to say something personal and also make it have a purpose by the end. So that's a very common way of doing that. You start with a personal story, and then as we progress, we move towards the statement of purpose. And I mean, in fact, that's sort of the basic model for almost every essay that we work on. You just help us bridge the gap between the personal story that you tell to the purpose part. Why does it matter? And specifically, why does it have anything to do with your ambition to be a lawyer? Okay. When is the next webinar? Oh, that is a great question. So Selene and I are now doing regular office hours on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Anyone can come. You can bring any questions. We'll do, let's call them marquee webinars like this, maybe once a month, where we'll have a presentation and we'll give away something free. But you can come every week and ask your questions, Wednesdays at 9 p.m. ET. Okay, let's see, is GV here, whoever asked this question? If you are, I'm gonna ask you to raise your hand now. Okay. Let's see, promote to panelist, that's what I have to do. Oh, it looks like, Giselle, I can't let you talk for some reason. I'm not sure why. Oh, well. I'll read this one out loud. I applied previously for the last application cycle and got into a few schools, but they really weren't my top choices, so I decided against going last fall. I'm applying for this cycle, but I'm concerned that with it being this late in the cycle, it'll make it much more difficult to get accepted. I'm taking the LSAT in 2 weeks. While I'm close to my target score, I'm still not hitting it. On the subject of reapplying, I'm also not sure how much I need to modify my last personal statement since I'll be applying to some of the same schools. In my statement, I have basically 3 things I touch on that help me lead to wanting to attend law school. The story behind why I want to go to law school hasn't changed, so I'm not sure where to begin modifying it. I might be able to remove one of the ideas of the personal statement and make it into an addendum. I'm almost considering putting off this app cycle again. Okay, this is a tricky situation, and I'll tell you why. Have you heard of the saying, burn me once, shame on you, burn me twice, shame on me? I think there is a bit of that attitude in law school admissions. If you turned down a school last cycle, you sent a pretty strong signal that they weren't good enough for you. So you have an uphill battle now. It's going to be harder to get in. I would love to hear what Selene thinks, but my first piece of advice is that if you're reapplying to a school, I strongly suggest that you write an addendum explaining why you couldn't go and why it wasn't really what you said here, that they weren't your top
Hello?
choice. Selene, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with the idea of writing an addendum about sort of why you didn't end up going last year? And
Yes, I think that's a wise idea. And even if the truth is that they weren't your top choice, and it was, and you just decided not to go to law school, I would find a better explanation. Because I think if you were really blunt about it, then they might say, well, it's not the same applicant pool, and maybe their medians have changed a bit, and maybe the same file wouldn't be considered for admission this year. It really depends on how the reader who gets your file this next time around is going to react to whatever they see. So I think the idea of including an addendum, sort of explaining yourself and why you're applying again this time around is a great idea. And the fact that you've been working full time is a wonderful excuse.
yeah, I've seen people say, there were family issues and that's why I didn't apply. I've seen people say, I got a promotion and I really felt like I couldn't turn it down. Don't lie. Just find a true reason that contributed to the fact that you didn't choose to go. And I see now it looks like you got your microphone working. So if you want to say hi.
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay, great. So when I turned the 2 schools down that I got into, I did send them an explanation why at that time.
Okay, that's good.
And I explained, I had a project that I wanted to kind of finish through with my job. And then because I didn't get the scholarships that I really needed and wouldn't have a way to pay for it, I still have undergraduate student loans from several years ago. I explained that I wanted to, retake the LSAT and get a better score and be a more competitive applicant. So I actually told them that at that time.
All right. Well, looks like, you already communicated that very clearly. I do think it's important to make your application different. And it may be the personal statement. I have met I've met a few, but I have not met many personal statements in my career that couldn't be better in some way. So I would just go in with the attitude that I'm going to make this different and I'm going to make it better. I'm going to explain why I want to be a lawyer. Maybe that part hasn't changed, but there's many ways. There are many ways to explain something, and maybe you can explain it more vividly or more personally or something.
Yeah, I don't know how much time I have, but basically in my statement, I just mentioned essentially 3 things that drove me to want to go to law school. So 2 of them are kind of personal reasons and experiences that I've had in my life, and then the other one is a hobby and something that I kind of use to get through adversities, and these other 2 personal reasons. So I feel like it's a lot in a statement, and I don't know if I can maybe remove one of those things and somehow make it into an addendum. Well,
so we are actually out of time. But my final piece of advice is you probably can. I often think that less is more. I think that if you unpack one story over 5 or 6 paragraphs, it is likely to be as or more effective than trying to tell 3 stories. You don't want to list reasons. You want to make them understand. And you make them understand with narrative, not with argument.
Okay. Thank you so much. And sorry about my microphone problem here.
No problem. Good luck.
Appreciate it. Thanks again.
Okay. So this one I'm gonna handle a little bit quickly because I realized it is actually pretty impractical to look at a personal statement in a group setting like this. So I'm going to say this. This essay falls into a category that I call amazing life story. And write about it. If you have a story everyone's life story is their life story. So you don't have perspective on it, right? You have to step outside of it to see. But if you have a story that is going to make other people drop their jaw a little bit, I think you absolutely want to talk about it. This personal statement is about someone who is in a cult. So I think that admissions officers will be very interested, if nothing else. What I noticed when I read this, though, is that it is just the story, and it doesn't really transition to a why you want to be a lawyer or a lesson about what you took from this experience that's going to make you a better lawyer. And I think one of those two things is crucial. And maybe I'll just write that down. So if you're telling a personal story, I think you pretty much either have to transition at the end to why you want to be a lawyer, or why the story taught you something or helped you grow in a way that's going to make you a better lawyer. It's relevant to law school. So if you're here, you can raise your hand and we can talk about it for another 3 minutes. Okay, great. Hi, Rachel.
Hi there.
How's it going?
Going great. Thank you. Very helpful already.
Okay, good. Yeah, do you want to ask me some questions about that, or do you want to?
Yeah, so I was kind of wondering, is it preferable or necessary to include some kind of direct reference as to why I wanted to attend law school? I think you answered that, and I think there are ways I can work that in. Can you help me know what defines a good ending, and how do you keep it from being cheesy and cliche and actually meaningful?
Oh my God. Well, I went to an MFA program in Iowa, and all we talked about for 5 years or for 2 years was what makes a good ending. And what I came to learn is I have no idea. Endings are really hard. I will say, first of all, though, that like I can tell just at a glance that you're a good writer and you care about writing.
Yes.
So honestly, you'll probably have to find your ending.
Okay.
But I also wouldn't be afraid to be cheesy. I mean, you are not writing something for the New Yorker. You're not writing something for the Kenyon Review. You are writing something for Law School Admissions Committee. And I think that you can. Here, let's see if we can create a taxonomy of endings. Acceptable endings for PS. Whoops. So I think it's totally acceptable to have a straightforward and I look forward to applying these lessons in law school. I think another great way to end, not just a personal statement, but any essay, is the loop, by which I mean a callback to something that you mentioned in the beginning. So, if the first paragraph has you a scene where you're trembling and afraid to sit down in that cockpit, maybe the last scene is but I set my teeth, I sat down, and I put my hand on the flight stick, or whatever it is. Show us that you're ready to go so you can come back to something. Or I just think this may not be helpful, but what is the end of your story? Where just tell us the ending. If you have already, you can only do this. How did that story end? You can only do that if you've already reached to some significance in the paragraph before. You know what I mean? So if your story is about leaving the cult, just tell us okay, well, how did you get here now? And that's why I'm sitting right here. I wouldn't worry too much about making it artistic. What do you think, Selene?
I think artistic is great. I would just make sure that no matter what ride you're trying to take the reader on, at the very end, they should feel comfortable that you are going to be a well-balanced, self-directed law student. Does that make sense? No matter how interesting your life was before law school, when you get to law school, they want to make sure that you're going to be like the typical normal student.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it too cliche to talk about I want to stand up against injustice?
That's always a good ending.
Okay.
But I don't know if I would use that exact phrase.
Right.
I mean, I would love to know what specific injustice. There's a lot of it.
Yes.
I would like to know what injustice, and I would like to see how it stems from the story you just told.
Okay. I can do that.
Okay. Good luck.